Hi to everyone. Fammi ancora le micro cuffie. Oh, I'm sorry for this to start a little bit late. Thanks for being with us. So I am Anna Raimondo, sound and visual artist and PhD student based in Brussels. I was a resident here at the Amer Institut des Études Avancées, from where I'm speaking from here in Marseille. And I'm also forming part of the 4th edition of the Wandering Arts Biennial, curated by the Artistic Center based in Brussels, Nadine, and which is taking place from 2020 until June 2021. I think, yeah. The Wandering Arts Biennial is a contemporary arts biennial that focuses on research, production, and presentation methods of artists with nomadic practices. We are speaking about sound, so there is a little bit of Larsen. I hope that you understood what I told you so far. Before presenting you the main topics of the conference of today, acts of listening and urban geography, I want to thanks, of course, to the Amer and its wonderful team for hosting and organizing this conference that was conceived during the residence within the confinement and finally made it real. And of course, the Artistic Center Nadine in Brussels for promoting the event. Today, we will speak about the practices of listening and urban geography, and we will do it connecting different geographies, different territories, and different jet lags. I deeply want to thank the participants of this talk, and I hope to say well their name and surname. In the case, you will listen directly to them afterwards, so I'm sorry if in advance if I make wrong accents. I'm very glad to be with Gasha Uzunyan, who is an associate professor of music and at the University of Oxford, where she directs the project Sonorous Cities Toward the Sonic Urbanism. Very glad to be with Griselda Flesler from Buenos Aires, professor in design and gender studies and of the postgraduate courses Design, Feminist Theory and Gender Studies and Gender Perspective at the University at FADU UBA in Buenos Aires. And she's also head of the gender office FADU UBA in Buenos Aires. Amer Kanngieser from Sydney, geographers, sound artists, and Marie Curie Research Fellows in Geography at Royal Holloway University of London. Before starting, I would like you to give a glimpse of the context and the drives of this conference, which will be, which will last around 1 hour and a half. This conversation starts from the premise that the production of knowledge based on the gaze implies a visual ideology, a normative way of seeing which is learned and inherited and which is highly impacted by patriarchal colonial class-based patterns. In this regard, I refer to Judith Butler's reflections on the epistemological normative path which establishes the bodies that matter, the bodies that are legitimated to be recognized, acknowledged, the ones which deserve, as they say, a good life by having access to the human rights. And more in particular, to what the philosopher and activist Paul Preciado defines as the regime of the visible. With this formula, Preciado defines a form of a normative epistemology based on the perspective, which in fact acknowledges and makes legitimate reality according to previous binary normative frames, such as man, woman, black, white, valid, invalid. In other words, according to Paul Preciado, is by adhering to this regime of the visible that a body could become a body that matters. In our context, speaking about urban geography, shifting our attention from the bodies to the territories and focusing our attention in the field of urban geography, we could continue that bodies that matter contribute to build cities that matter. By quoting the feminist geographer Jane Dark in Leslie Kern's Feminist City, published by Verso in 2020, any settlement is an inscription in space of the social relations in the society that built it. Our cities are patriarchy written in stone, brick, glass, and concrete. In other words, Kern continues, once built, our cities continue to shape and influence social relations, power, inequality, and so on. Stone, brick, glass, and concrete help to shape the range of possibilities for individuals and groups. Their form helps keep some things seeming as normal and right, and other wrong. In short, physical places like cities matter when we want to think about social change, I'm quoting. Coming again to the regime of the visible, so how does it operate in the field of urban in the epistemologic approach to territories and landscapes within a discipline like urban geography? Could the reflection about the regime of the visible within the cities helps to reveal, for example, the set of barriers, physical, social, economic, and symbolic, that shape daily lives in ways that are deeply gendered and racialized? Echoing the regime of the visible, some Gillian Rose sets out that in a phenomenological and trans-disciplinary approach to the land, I'm quoting, the gaze of the field worker is part of the problematic, not a tool of analysis. All these reflections lead to the main question of this encounter. How could the act of listening, intended as both oral and sonic analysis and production of the heard, contribute to produce forms of alternative and more inclusive forms of knowledges in the discipline of urban geography? What will be the epistemological implications of shifting from perspective to the listening of a specific territory? How to reflect and possibly deconstruct via listening to the cities that matter, the geography that matter, the cartography that matter? What listening could reveal about how gendered and racialized cities are built of? And could it eventually become a decolonial and feminist approach to encourage a feminist turn in the discipline itself? In this encounter, listening is intended as a potential that augments, expands, and critically evaluates how we see the world and how we arrange ourselves to live in it. I'm quoting Salome Boegli. The idea is to put in dialogue 4 different experiences of practice-based researches in relation to urban geography, which propose forms of sonic situated knowledges. By sonic situated knowledges, I'm referring to any broad reflections about how sound and listening produce knowledge, and in particular to her epistemologic proposition of sonic situated knowledge, which is always situated critical renegotiation of the subject-object relation in sound studies. That's how we arrived to the title, Acts of Listening and Urban Geography for Proposition of Sonic Knowledges about Territories. We will stay together, as I told you, about 1 hour and a half. After the presentation, a Q&A moment with the audience is planned. I am very glad to start this conference with Gasha Uzunyan. Hi, Gasha. If you can put the microphone and tell me if I say right your surname to start with.
It's Gasha Uzunyan. That's okay. And nice to meet you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot, Gassia. You are associate professor of music and at the University of Oxford, when you direct the project Sonorous Cities Toward a Sonic Urbanism. Your work is concerned with the philosophies, technologies, and aesthetic ideologies that shape ideas of sound and space within and across such fields as music, sound art, psychology, engineering, and urban design. And you are also author of Stereophonica, Sound and Space in Science, Technology, and the Arts. Thanks a lot to stay with us. I let you introduce yourself and your.
I really appreciate the introduction. And is my sound okay? Sometimes there's a bit of an echo. Okay. And my other question is, shall I just do my talk, or will we do question after it, or all the presenters and then a discussion?
I think probably the best thing is that each one of us will make their presentation, and afterwards we will plan the Q&A among us.
Thank you. That sounds great. And just to mention, I will speak for about 20 minutes, and I'm going to share my screen and do. Let me make sure to turn audio on when I do this. Share sound, and actually, what I want to share is this. I wonder if I can only share this. If I make this large, does that look okay on your end? Yeah, okay, great. So I'm going to give a talk on sonic cartographies, and in particular on the sonic countermappings of cities. So as Anna mentioned, my name is Gassia Uzunian. I'm Associate Professor of Music at Oxford, and in 2013 I started a project with an architect called Sarah Lappin at my previous university, which was in Belfast. And this project was really about bringing together people who are working across sound art, sound studies, architecture, and urban design, and to see how we can form different kinds of new, let's say, collaborative and interdisciplinary modes of practice across those fields. That's an ongoing network. And maybe just to show you a very quick example of a recent project that we did with a group called Tetra Mundi, we were inviting architects and urban designers to think about graphic scores and kind of experimental notations in music as a basis for creating urban scores that would encompass maybe more improvisational and performative approaches to design of urban space. So if you're interested, you can find examples of their scores on our website at scoring.city. And I'm mentioning that because we are also going to soon host workshops on sound mapping and sonic countermapping. So if there are people here who are interested in that, you're very welcome to send me a note, or you can also sign up from our website, which is called soncities.org. Okay, so I'm going to then get into my talk. So Anna gave us this really great prompt on thinking about the regime of the visual in urban geography. And visualism is a very kind of deeply rooted paradigm in urban studies and urban practice. So if we, to think about that, you could cite, for example, the work of Kevin Lynch, a very foundational text called Image of the City, which is really concerned with the city's imageability, or else Gordon Collins' The Concise Townscape, in which he argues that the city is best understood as a series of unfolding pictures. So he develops this idea of serial vision as underlying urban analysis, or Alan Jacobs' Looking at Cities, in which he's talking about looking as a diagnostic tool for urban designers. Now, these are older texts, but they're hugely influential in the field, and that kind of visualism continues to permeate those disciplines. So Anna drew on the work of the feminist geographer Gillian Rose, who writes that the gaze of the field worker is part of the problematic, not a tool of analysis, and asks the question, can listening contribute alternative urban epistemologies? So that's a question that I'm interested as well. In particular, I'm going to look at this phenomenon of noise mapping and sound mapping, which is has a very rich history in the 20th century. And today there's many tens of thousands of noise maps, for example, produced by municipalities. And they constitute a very vast body of work, knowledge, representations of the acoustic city, and they inform urban planning as well as legislation around sound and noise. So this is a kind of epistemological, resource, something that we can look at and kind of study how knowledge is produced and created there. So I'm going to give a kind of introduction to noise mapping and sound mapping, and then think about maybe some artists who are questioning the underlying visual as well as sonic epistemologies within that. So I have a chapter on sound mapping in the book that Anna mentioned, which is called Stereophonica, Sound in Space and Science, Technology and the Arts, and noise mapping. And there I trace the roots of noise mapping to visual and textual forms of the late 19th and 20th, early 20th centuries. And by textual, I'm thinking about things like noise surveys, noise complaints, also things like health reports by officers of health, which start to really focus on noise as a public health problem, and then how to legislate around noise. That's in the very early 20th century. And also visual kind of media like this. This is a decibel chart. It's a kind of table of noise measurements of different New York City noises, which was commissioned as part of this very important report called City Noise, 1929 to 1930. Here they were going around taking noise level readings by hand of these different sites in New York City. And together I was saying, you know, these do constitute almost like proto noise maps. But around this time, this is late 1930s, you also start to get these kind of topographical maps of noise levels. And again, this is with going around and taking handheld noise level readings. And so these are representing actual noise measurements taken on site. Well, this kind of mapping of the acoustic city continues to predominate today in urban planning and urban policy. In the book, I make this argument that it was, you know, in the 1930s that the decibel emerges as this standard measure of noise, but that when it's connected to the urban and to urban soundscapes, it starts to produce this idea of the city as a manufacturer of noise and as a site that can be meaningfully described in relation to noise levels. So what starts to emerge is this idea of the noise city, which is a site that can and should be monitored and regulated and policed, because what is the outcome of a lot of those noise studies are new laws around mitigating noise. And so again, that is still the kind of predominating approach to noise mapping. So this is something which is produced in response to noise legislation in Europe. It's the END directive, the Environmental Noise Directive, that legislates noise mapping. And maybe the biggest difference in terms of what's happening today is that a lot of these noise maps are generated using software. So it's no longer handheld noise level readings, but the software which is taking in kind of large urban data sets and outputting predicted versus actual noise levels of sites. And the other big development is participatory noise mapping. So there are projects like Noise Tube, Noise Crowd, in which people are measuring their own noise exposure using mobile devices, and then that also becomes incorporated into the map. But I just want to give one example of a kind of noise mapping project. This is Sounds of New York City. It's been ongoing in NYU since around 2015 or so. It's a large-scale urban noise monitoring project in which they've installed these cheap microphones across Lower Manhattan, which are capturing brief snippets of audio throughout the day and night. And then they've developed a machine learning algorithm which identifies the sounds picked up by those sensors. And there are people who are also annotating those recordings. So there's human listeners who are also training and essentially improving those algorithms. That's a photo that I took in New York, which is showing, you know, recording underway, that these short intermittent recordings are being conducted nearby. This is happening all over New York City. And what the ideal sonic noise map would do once they've implemented this kind of system fully is that it would dynamically visualize changes in noise level variance across the city in both 2 and 3 dimensions and identify what those noises are. And the conceit with a project like this, it's a kind of smart city project, is to enable better decision making around noise and more efficient implementation of noise policy. But what doesn't really ever really get addressed is, you know, what is the potential here for sonic surveillance, but also what kinds of citizenships are imagined through these kinds of mass citizen sensing projects. And I take that term citizen sensing from Jennifer Gabrus's program Earth, in which she writes, how does the sensor actuator logic implicit in these technologies not only program environments, but also program the sorts of citizens and collectivities that might concretize through these processes. So here the citizen is really imagined, I would say, as a kind of informant. It's somebody who collects data on noise and who essentially reports on noise infringements, so kind of reporting on your neighbors who are noisy. And the listener is imagined as a kind of censor. It's somebody who's identifying kind of noise levels and types of noises. And maybe there's a play there to make between censor and censor, since the goal, again, here is noise mitigation. So in my book, I make this argument that as one of the primary mechanisms through which city authorities are monitoring and regulating sonic environments of cities, it's really important, I think, for us to examine noise maps more closely, not only in terms of what they represent, but also the material effects that noise mapping has on communities as well as environments. And there I make the argument that really it's upholding interests of noise-making industries like travel and construction. So whereas noise maps are kind of official representations of the acoustic city, we also have sound maps, which are almost unofficial. They're like alternative mappings of the acoustic city, and they usually represent qualitative versus quantitative mappings. So they're representations typically of sounds and soundscapes versus noise levels. So I'm going to just show one quick example from the Montreal sound map. So these recordings can be made on a mobile phone. They can be geotagged to specific locations, and there's lots of metadata describing what kind of recording it is, where it was taken, using what kind of recording device, as well as what kind of day. And there's now a quite large collection of recordings made by anybody who wishes to contribute to the Montreal Sound Map on this archive. So just to move along, what they write is we aim for people to experience the complexity and lure of the soundscape firsthand. This promotes a more optimistic approach to acoustic ecology, encouraging listeners to lend a musical ear to the soundscape. So there are some interesting, I think, resonances here with the writings, for example, of Amer Schaefer and the World Soundscape Project, their idea of acoustic ecology and this idea of musicalizing soundscape. So now to kind of move more into the kind of critical sound mapping realm, I wanted to draw on the work of Milena Drumeva, who is questioning what she describes as the normative logics embedded in the practice of sound mapping, in which she identifies as being this kind of high quality field recording, a branch of high fidelity culture that operates as a masculine technological domain. And she draws on the work of Jackie Weldock, who writes, you know, if sound maps are a permanent researchable resource, an auditory archive of an environment, a historical record and subjective representation of the city, then what is being constructed in many cases is a male-dominated record of sound, an insight into the significance of sound from a normative perspective. And there, you could also say that there is a strong racialized as well as gendered aspect to sound mapping, whereas it's predominantly has been the domain of white male recordists. Samuel Thillen also makes this argument, similar argument in Sound Maps Matter, in which he is examining these 3 different sound mapping platforms and finds that they support an approach to sound mapping that favors pinning high fidelity indexical audio recordings to a seemingly neutral base layer. So Drumeva then suggests this term critical sound mapping as something that's kind of combining critical cartography with sound mapping. So now I want to look at a few projects that happen in that realm. This is one by Ali Martin, who also goes by the moniker Black Sound Lab, and it's called Go-Go Music and Displacement in Washington, D.C. And she's created a series of maps that chart how go-go music, which she describes as a Black indigenous subgenre of funk that developed in D.C., has been displaced as a result of really high gentrification in Washington, D.C. So these maps of alleys, they alighted with a very vibrant anti-gentrification movement called Don't Mute DC, which was concerned with the right of playing go-go music in public spaces. But of course, there were many, other social concerns underlying gentrification in DC. And it was a successful anti-gentrification movement in that they protected that right, as well as eventually go-go was named the official music of Washington, D.C., which actually means that the city has to support go-go financially. But this movement started when, this is just some clips from a BBC news story on this, when a noise complaint was lodged against this store, which is in a very central location, Metro PCS, that had played go-go outdoors for 25 years. And it was basically asked to stop playing. And at first that noise complaint was upheld, but then when this Don't Mute DC movement happened, that noise complaint was withdrawn and the municipality changed its mind, and people were allowed to then continue playing go-go music in public. So I just want to take a look at her maps. So there's a series of them. In the first one, she maps go-go venues against the Black population percentage of the city for these 3 decades. And you can see that as the Black population of the city is decreasing and medium income is increasing, there's also closing of those venues. And then she also uses, in another series of maps, time-lapse technology to show the opening and closing of go-go venues in DC over a 50-year period. And here I've just taken a kind of screen record that shows this time lapse. Okay, that's it playing once, and I just want to play it one more time so you can see it again. Okay, so whereas in earlier decades, you can see that those go-go venues are enjoying relative stability. They're grouped together, they're clustered together in central locations, which implies community as well as economic stability. As gentrification increases, those venues are kind of popping on and off the map much more quickly and no longer in a way that implies connection or closeness to other venues. And it's a much faster movement and unpredictable patterns. And that, in a sense, is a kind of representation also of the, let's say, violence of gentrification, those unpredictabilities of those displacements. So this kind of mapping project belongs in this, perhaps in this growing tradition of mapping musical cities. I'll just give 2 other examples of that quickly. This is by Susanna Zapke, Interactive Music Mapping Vienna, in which the aim is to reconstruct the sonic acoustic world of Vienna from 1945 to the present day using archival recordings, mainly of festivals and public spaces, or the Dublin Music Map, which is a kind of mapping of popular music venues and landmarks in Dublin. And what I want to say is Martin's mapping of the musical city is not concerned with cataloging or conserving or preserving urban sonic or musical heritages or creating a kind of musical tourism or trading or producing what often become kind of skewed musical nostalgias that are embedded in these other kinds of musical mappings. And there I would point you towards Christabel Sterling's really brilliant article, Sonic Methodologies in Urban Studies, in which she examines those dynamics. So much as it aims to reveal how uneven processes of urban gentrification impact on musical and ethnic communities and how those displacements are mediated by race and class. So I think this is a kind of important, I do think it's a very important project, but also in the ways in which it challenges underlying epistemologies and soundscape studies. So whereas in soundscape studies, when you're talking about soundscape, it's often about the indexing of a sonic environment. So collecting, recording, cataloging, analyzing the sounds of a place. And often that place is described almost in a neutral way. This project is revealing urban soundscapes as a contested site, here whose contests are framed in connection to class and racialized definitions of noise. And so it's positioning soundscape as a product of social, political, and economic relations. So whereas in soundscape studies, the predominating logic is one of soundscape as object, here there's an idea of soundscape as product, as a kind of social and cultural production. So it's asking us to consider not only which sounds are present in a city, which is often what soundscapes analysis is doing, but why they are present or absent. What are those social and political forces that enable certain soundscapes to develop, to remain, to become dominant soundscapes, or else force their early demise? So here, soundscape analysis is not about indexing sounds, but examining the social, political, and economic basis of what you might think of as sonic, social, and spatial productions. To give another example from Anna's work, and I saw maybe Anna, you will be speaking about this project as well. This is from Anna's project, New Boundaries of the Well-Being of Vaginal Ecosystems. This is a series of works which include interviews. It's almost like social cartographies of different cities and different sound mappings. But so this particular one is in Rome. It's a 6-channel sound installation along with a light intervention, and there is an image of that. And there's an accompanying map as well as a vinyl recording. And what Lucretia Cipitelli writes about this project is that Raimondo is asking a group of women of many different ages, sexual orientations, genders, cultures, origins to describe the city through the feelings caused by the spaces they inhabit, memories, stories, and history. Listening to the city spaces, which we often experience without hearing, guided by the voices of women, an auditory drift that leads the spectator to experience the crossing of different spaces in the body of a woman, a remapping of the city. I'm going to just show you, so this is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is one of the accompanying map. And I'm going to also play a quick excerpt of a video, which is also documenting this project.
Io entravo in via della Conciliazione, mi trovavo davanti il cupolone del Vaticano, acceleravo spingendo a tavoletta e andavo a tutta velocità immaginando che in cima alla macchina, come se fosse stato un pick-up della Toyota, con un RPG montato sopra, avrei sparato un missile contro il cupolone per distruggere questo nemico, come dire attenzione perché il vostro nemico è qui, io sono presente.
Medico di un ospedale religioso le ha chiesto quanti uomini ha avuto nella sua vita.
So, and here's I guess, detail from that map showing this, what the first speaker was describing in terms of wanting to send a missile to that. So this project was, I think, specifically formed in response to the work of Gillian Rose, whose book Feminism and Geography was challenging the implicit whiteness, maleness, and Eurocentrism of geography's supposedly neutral mappings and epistemologies. So Rose is drawing attention to the centrality of the visual to claims about knowledge, a visualism whereby, quote, seeing and knowing are often conflated. And in developing a discussion of the geographer's gaze, she draws on the work of cultural geographers who suggest that the gaze at landscape is, quote, a visual ideology because it uncritically shows only the relationship of the powerful to their environment, she writes. So I think here there's actually a really interesting parallel to traditions of soundscape recordings, which are often based on the premise of a white male recordist whose inaudible body, who you can't hear, and it's been absented from this quite sterilized recording, is capturing an exotic acoustic scene. And that's a trope that's repeated in a lot of soundscape recording. So I want to ask, is there a parallel here between the geographer's gaze and the field recordist's ear? And is there a regime of the oral, which is also operating here alongside the regime of the visual? And can we also question this regime and how it has developed? Another thing to say about Anna's project, I mean, there's much more to say, but in sound mapping, what is often mapped are the sounds of public spaces, which have historically been the domain of men. And this is something that in Feminist City that Anna mentioned by Leslie Curran is also really quite deeply examined as something that still operates in terms of urban design. And Raimondo is building a counter narrative of the city by asking people who have experienced marginalization as a result of gender, sexuality, race, citizenship to share their experiences of the city. And so what emerges is a mapping of these kind of shared experiences of marginalization, harassment, exclusions. So interviewees are relaying how their experience of the city is gendered, how the built forms of the city are gendered, how specific places breed misogynism, and how the city itself is gendered. I would say more about this if we had time, Anna, but yeah, I just want to show one or two more examples quickly and then wrap of a sonic countermappings. This is a project by the sound artist Lawrence Abu Hamdan, Said Naya, the Missing 19 Decibels, which was done in collaboration with Amnesty International and Forensic Architecture, in which Hamdan collects ear witness testimonies from 6 survivors of this very brutal military prison near Damascus, where over 13,000 people had been executed. Now, the prison was inaccessible to independent observers and monitors, and prisoners were kept in darkness. They were blindfolded or made to cover their eyes. And so he collected ear witness testimony, this is him writing, to help reconstruct the prison's architecture and gain insight as to what is happening inside. So this is a kind of production of knowledge in a highly contested space in which people are being tortured and killed, which could only emerge through this kind of oral perspective, since people were unable to view the architecture of that prison. And one other example is by Samuel Thulin. He has a project called Sounding Desert Utopias, in which he writes, I created this 8-channel composition by working extensively with 128 audio files which were accidentally geotagged in the middle of the Libyan desert on freesound.org. And what he says is, well, what I think it's doing is, you know, by looking at these kind of accidental sound mappings, it's challenging what has become a very predominating logic in mapping in general, which is GIS-based mapping. And it's challenging that totalizing logic, as well as the presumed infallibility of GIS, and asking, what does it mean to locate? I'm going to skip over, just for time, one more project that I wanted to introduce, but we could also maybe do that in the question and answer. So historically, sound maps and noise maps have thought about the acoustic city as a kind of neutral site, but these kinds of sound mapping projects, I think, are doing something where they reveal the acoustic city as an unstable site and as a site of contests where certain social and economic interests are upheld and others are repressed, sometimes in very targeted ways, like in the example of the go-go music being shut down. So acoustic mappings are representations of those sites as well as expressions of those contests, whether that's being done consciously or not. So through urban sonic countermappings, can we develop alternative epistemologies of the acoustic city? These are mappings that might resist or counter official narratives of cities as well as urban communities. Perhaps they give us new insights into urban processes, things like urban displacement or gentrification. These are mappings that might resist normative logics of sound mapping and noise mapping. So for example, that high quality field recording tech culture, or reproducing those tropes about the recordist's ear. Perhaps they emerge as social cartographies as well as sonic and spatial cartographies. Perhaps they engage what Martin has described as an intersectional listening that cuts across gender, race, and class. Perhaps they challenge dominant spatial logics as well as mapping systems, like the GIS one. And they might also be maps where not only what the map represents, but the process of mapping is questioned. So it's often in that case too, which is where the kind of political emerges. So how might sonic countermappings transform what we understand about acoustic cities and the urban more broadly? In what ways might sound mapping challenge sonic epistemologies underlying our sonic disciplines, as well as the visualism underlying urban geography? Can we develop a critical appreciation of these oral as well as visual regimes? And can that inform urban sonic practice at large? So thanks very much for listening. I'm sorry if I've been a bit over time. I lost track of when we started, but thank you.
Thanks a lot. Gasia, I hope I tell it right or not.
Yeah, great.
But I have to make a project one day because I always make mistake when I pronounce names, so it's a big disaster. But thanks a lot. It was really passionate, your presentation. We will definitely come back soon on
okay.
also
Someone else
through the questions. Thanks a lot. From Oxford, now let's jump to Buenos Aires. Another complete different jet lag. Griselda Flesser is in Buenos Aires. I think it's early morning, so I deeply thank her for her engagement in the early morning for this conference. So Griselda Flesser was born in Mar del Plata, Argentina in 1976. She is a graphic designer and the Master in Communication Design and the FADU UBA in Buenos Aires, PhD student in Social CS at University of Buenos Aires. She's professor in Design and Gender Studies and of the postgraduate courses Design, Feminist Theory and Gender Studies and Gender Perspective at the University FADU UBA, and head of the Gender Office FADU UBA in Buenos Aires. She's also General Director of Public Voices, a collective sound recording project in the context of public feminist demonstrations, march in Latin American countries and Switzerland. Co-director of Design and Gender Project supported by Gender Design in STEAM for LMICS from Carleton University, Canada. Member of the IPHI Award Committee of the International Gender Design Network. And since 1998, she's a university teacher. She's been invited in different Argentinian and foreign universities. And now she's with us, and I'm very glad because I follow her work since years. She will present some initial ideas about public spaces in the context of the feminist and sexual dissidents agenda in Argentina. In particular, she will speak about the Public Voices project and her research on queer uses of university spaces. Thanks a lot, Griselda.
Hola, Ana. Hi, everybody. Okay, well, I share screen. Okay. Okay, I think I will be quick with this presentation and then we can share and get some feedback. So this is the entrance of my university, of the School of Architecture and Design. And when I see this picture, this photograph, I think, and I wonder, and I question and I ask this question: who is allowed to enter of this university and all of universities around the world? Because the university, this university is public, is free, but either is not for everybody. So the question about who is welcome in a public space, because this university is public, is for me the main question, because with Butler we know that not all the bodies are welcome in public space. So which are the requirements, the forms of stylization of the body, the social and material resource, which counts as an indicator of who would be inside and who outside of the regulatory frameworks of university, is for me a question and starting point of many research. So one of these research is financing by Carleton University in Canada, and is about thinking how campus is designed, and well, the gender gaze and of these actions. No, so in this picture we can see this is the main stairs of the inside of architectural school, and we as we can see here is the canonical architecture framed, and then interrupting, hacking this structure is this noise. You know, it's a feminist noise. It's a poster about it's a feminist march, and is interrupting the canonical discourse, the canonical rhythm of the university discourse. So for me, it's a great metaphor of what is happening since a few years inside public universities in Argentina. So for the framework for or the theoretical framework for think about how feminism asks questions and cracks the canon of universities, I use the concept of Sarah Ahmed. Queer use refers to how things can be used in a way other than for which they were intended, or by those other than for whom they were intended. The university, the space university, was designed for principle for some bodies, and queer use offers us another way of talking about diversity work, the work you have to do to open institutions to those for whom they were not intended. So Sarah Ahmed says that vandalism maybe could see as queer use, and I add the concept of listening the walls, because when we listen in the walls, we are adding an archive of meanings, other meanings, traces and memoirs of other speeches, alternative discourse and thoughts. So I wonder, this is for example a stamp in the wall. It says that in the architectural and design school you can ask for help if you are if you suffer gender violence, for example. And I wonder how cleaning the walls, you know, because this is vandalism, and as institution you have to clean the walls, for example, no? Well, I wonder how cleaning walls is, or I think cleaning walls as ideological and political action, you know, and how, well, it's in terms of surveillance, in terms of what Raja says before about noise, you know, and how you you shut this noise or allow this noise, because I think we have to, as institutions, start to listen in the walls. So other projects, yeah, is about how is public voices, and this is a photo of the first march, exactly the first round of Madres of the Plaza de Mayo, Mothers of Plaza de Mayo, during, this is 44 years ago, the first march during the last dictatorships. And during the last dictatorship, people could not gather in public space, had to circulate. People could not shout or speak aloud or make noise in public space. So this mother asking for their missing children start to circulate around the main square of Buenos Aires city. And they still every Thursday circulating around in silence. And I think this is a performance and political act and a legacy about what implies being politically in public space. And I think this is, yeah, if you have to trace, make a traceability about what implies being as a body, a noise body in public space, is this, for me, the starting point of this is about how silence is sometimes more powerful than noise. So since 2015, Argentina saw a growing the feminist movement, and the bodies and the shouts and the sounds in public space were louder and louder, and but with different kind of women and different kind of layers of meaning. So in public space, which is a collective sound recording project in the context of public feminist marches in several countries of Latin America, we want to create a cultural heritage and archive through these songs, shouts, but also through whispers and little conversations which take place in during these marches. So we recorded these manifestations in different layers of since silence to shouts, no? So with all the levels, the gradients. This is, for example, a performance in Paraguay, in Asunción, and it's a group telling poems, whispering poems near in public space during a feminist march. So as you can see, it's a different level of approach and of well. So during the pandemic time, we ask ourselves, what is public space? So because we were forbidden to march in public space, so we ask what is public space, and we use radio and digital platforms to express and to make this make this archive larger. And finally, I want to share with you some of the work we are doing. Oh, I think I have to, sorry, I have to start again to, I have to share again, sorry, because I didn't, I don't know if you, well, listen and you tell me if you don't, okay? Are you listening? No? No, I think,
no,
okay.
It's very low.
Because don't let, oh, here. Now, yes, okay, sorry, yeah, now. Okay.
El 8, no sé, con las pibas siempre decimos que es nuestra Navidad. Es apropiarnos de la calle, apropiarnos de todo lo que nos robaron una vez por año, todas juntas. Aunque lo hagamos todos los días, lo intentamos hacer. Hoy es el día que lo hacemos con más fuerza y con más ganas, con más glitter, con más violeta, con todo. Y lo hacemos inmenso.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Griselda, for this presentation full of evocations, reflections, and I really look forward for the final part in which we could put together what we are saying, because already between what Gazia and you are saying, there are some parallelism and reflection, possible reflections. So now it's my turn. I will try to make you wait. Che succede qua? Just a second. I don't know what happened. Oh, okay. Can you tell me if you can see my screen? Someone can tell me yes or not. Yeah. Yes, perfect. Thanks a lot, Elena. Okay, so I will go a little bit through my PhD research that I'm leading, that I'm making in Brussels between l'Académie Royale des Beaux-Arts et la ULB. I'm an artist, so it's a PhD, a practice-based PhD, and the title is New Genders of Listening, Voices, Silences, Bodies, and Territories. Basically, I'm starting from a main question that try to explore what could be defined as gendered listening, because I'm feminist since 20 years. Since 20 years, of course, my feminism has been changing and has been changing me a lot. And since the very beginning, everyone was speaking about the gendered perspective as a kind of prism to interpret the real. But as long as I mainly work with listening as a method in my process, or in my artistic process, and also often in the formalization of my works, I start to reflect about how normative patterns in gender, in race, in class also impact the way I myself listen and produce listening. And in this sense, there is an echo of what Gasia was telling about the regime of orality. When we listen a voice, we are never innocent. When we listen a territory, neither. So probably I'm trying to understand when gendered listening could be a critical approach to the voices, to the silences, to the territories. And today in particular, I would like to focus on this possibility of gendered listening as a tool to interpret the territories. So how, in the frame of the main question, how could sound and listening produce knowledge within feminist urban geography? I assume, as also Leslie Kern, I was quoting before in Feminist City, states out how cities themselves generate gendered questions. And so how could gendered listening provide a tool of embodied analysis? Of course, this kind of considerations makes necessary in a way to positionate myself. And so, of course, you can see I'm a white middle-class woman, cis woman. As I told you, I'm feminist, now very close by intersectional, decolonial, and transfeminism. And of course, when I speak about the I, I'm very aware about what Judith Butler suggests to be aware of. My I, of course, is a reflect, again, of power system and normative patterns, but it's also a possibility of relation. As Monica Wittig also states, how actually she, whereas Judith Butler suggests to put always I between guillemets, I don't know how to say in English. Monica Wittig, who is a lesbian poet, suggests to put the I always in italic, to suggest this tension of the I toward the otherness, the other and the not yet. So there is always this tension that I also embody between all the power system that inhabit me and the relational I inhabit. That in a way, in my artistic practice and also in my theoretical proposition, is combined. So it's on one side what I was mentioning you at the very beginning of sonic situated knowledge proposed by Annie Go as a way to contribute to the formation of knowledge in a very embodied and situated place in which the I form part of the object of study, so where is a fusion between the subject and an object. As also Salome Voeglin states out, when we listen, actually, we always form part of the heart and vice versa. And so I combine this possibility of sonic situated knowledge with the practice of opening the mic, because I'm completely convinced that each one has their voices, and as an artist what I do is just to create context of listening and try to encourage, let's say, a kind of more inclusive listening. In my practice as an artist and also as kind of a PhD student, I start from the body, from my body, but also from the voices, embodied voices and bodies of people that I meet. And of course, coming back to listening and body, we know that listening is always an embodied practice. So how could we speak about listening as a bodily gendered performative practice? Coming back and quoting the Judith Butler's proposition of interpretation of gender as a daily performance. Also, listening is impacted, conditioned by that. So how could, in a way, really, how could we be critical within it, and how we could reveal this process of genderization within listening? I will probably go straight to a project that is a little bit in the heart of my PhD research, which is the project that Gassia was mentioning before, that it starts by calling itself new boundaries of well-being of vaginal ecosystem, and I will come back on the title just afterwards, but that in the time has also changed its title, because I think that also artworks can be fluid and change titles. In this project, in a way, as Gassia also was pointing out, I started from some reflections by Gillian Rose, who is a feminist geographer. Again, by stating that the visual ideology, the gaze, is part of the problem in the urban analysis, and that implies, again, a relationship object-subject that reminds the masculinist aesthetics and erotism. And so, as a listener, as an artist working with sound, I propose the gendered listening to approach the urban analysis. And I will rather focus on listening, seeking to understand how and when it embraces the right to the opacity conceived by Edouard Glissant in the approach with the other, while allowing and problematizing identities discourses based on gender, sexual orientation, and race. I think it was already almost clear, but when I speak about listening, I refer, for example, to Salome Boeglin's philosophical approach to listening as a phenomenological, aesthetic, and political tool to explore the world. By this, she refers to the fact that while listening, we haven't fixed and clear references, and this lacks allow us to activation of our subjectivity while questioning the ideological frames we are used to interpret what she defines the possible sonic words. According to feminist plural views on life and spaces, this concept will be capital to express and record the diversity of perceptions and conceptual interpretations of urban spaces. With my project, New Boundaries of the Well-Being of Vaginal Ecosystem, in a way I try to reflect and to activate in my artistic practice, which is always participatory and relational approach, a kind of affective and bodily and embodied geography. So a geography which is told and mapped by voices, made of significant places. I will come back on this because it's really capital in my method of interview. I don't want to put values during interviews, so I will when we do cartography of specific territories, I always speak about significant place so that the people that I meet could decide how they put themselves values to the places. A geography which is made of our bodies and experiences, a geography made of subjectivities, presences, and present, and which takes in account the multiplicity of gender perspective. Two quick notes about the title. So I wonder, what do you think if I say New Boundaries of Well-Being of the Vaginal Ecosystem? Personally, I stole this title to my brother, who is a gynecologist. When I saw this title, I immediately think about the boundaries that are very clear for gendered bodies. Some people issued by minority communities and often invisible to the master subject, no, the white cis hetero bourgeois men. So I was thinking about the boundaries of the public space, the well-being that, as a feminist, I think should be a citizen right for everyone, and this vaginal ecosystem that for me is very important because it reminds me a kind of both biological and symbolic vaginas, a kind of oceans of feminism, of possibilities to inhabit the world with woman. And I always quote Loredana Rossi, who is the founder of the association Trans in Naples, that says, "I've got my vagina here," by indicating her brain. So for me, of course, I really insist on it. The vagina is not just the physical, biological organ, but it's also a possible metaphor, a possible symbol to reappropriate. I won't speak about the step in Rome because Gassia, I think, did it very, very better than I could do. Just to mention that it's a trans-geographic project that I'm leading since 2017, and I had the chance to realize it in different geographies. It's not I don't want to make a comparative work on an objective work. It's really about encounter, mapping, subjectivities present. But may I say that, for example, in all these steps, there were reflections about how religious symbols can affect our daily lives, how the statues are an important way to remind our positions in the public space. For example, here in Valparaiso, one of the participants speak about one statue in Plaza Victoria, and she say, if we are immobile, we are not alive, we are allowed to be naked in the public space. Or, for example, of course, a lot of reflections about the rape, the violence we are used to be victim of, unfortunately, that it's part of what Kern speaks about. Rape myths also have a geography, and these sexist myths about rape serve to remind us that we are expected to limit our freedom to work, have fun, and take up space in the city. They say the city is not really for you. In Valparaiso, let's say that in a general project, I always produce a map in collaboration with the graphic designer Marza Dalfini, and a disc, so a sonic composition combining all the voices and the soundscapes of the places evocated. But then each context has its own formalization. In Valparaiso, for example, it became a series of sound walks in which the voices that guided, the voices I interviewed guide the visit, I would say, the exploration of the city from a very multiple point of view, and were kind of performative in the sense that these voices also invite audience to listen, to see, to make things in the public space in order to feel like a woman, like these women. In Santa Cruz de Tenerife also it becomes a sonic installation, and in particular also a series of portraits. For example, Magda decided to mention a Parque Garcia Sanabria, one sculpture that was fat as she is. She's an activist against fat phobia, and so she really wants to go there and to smile to the statue, to say, okay, it's not a big issue that you are fat, you will be happy. Or for example, another of the participants, Farah, was speaking me about the Franquist sculptures that still have an impact on the daily life, on her daily life. So you can see here the pictures of Magda in front of the statue, and Farah in front of one of the Franquist statue in Santa Cruz de Tenerife. I would like to finish by mentioning the last stage, last etap of this step of this work that is actually now exhibited in Brussels at La Centrale for Contemporary Art in the frame of the exhibition Bruxelles Universal 2, Multiplicity, and also in the public space with this system of QR codes that everyone can download and listen on place. Again, in this project, there is an attempt to put together, to combine the specificity, the subjectivity of the voice, the place that they mention, and the listener, the audience. And in the case of Brussels, again, map with Marza Dalfini, and I really, in each project, I start by interviewing around 10 women, cis, trans, and non-binary trans people, asking them so to map their most significant places. And the registers is very plural. For example, in the case of Brussels, you can find Place de Béguinage, told by Séverine Janssen, because this was the place in which she has her first love meeting in Brussels. So really a kind of more intimate register. But you can also find, for example, Le Monument aux Pigeons Soldats, which is a monument dedicated to the pigeon who helped soldiers during the First World War. And this statue was mentioned by Daida Yancy, who is a Black queer activist, that say, okay, I'm okay with the fact that there is a monument for the pigeon, but where are the females, the Senegalese, all the other bodies that also contribute to the First World War in Belgium in this context? Or, for example, Laura, who mentioned the famous statue Leopold II. I don't know if someone of you knows a little bit the actuality about this statue, but this was the king who really colonialized the most violent way Congo, and there is a polemic arguing if we have still to be these symbols of power in the public space or not. Of course, in this project, we have voices, we have territories, but the body is central. It's really, really important in this project. That's the reason why I decided also to accompany the work in the frame of the art center with a sonic sculpture made of six moulage, I don't know how to say, of gestures that appeared in a kind of spontaneous way during the interviews and reminded the relationship between the participants and the public space. You have, for example, this gesture. I asked Gaia to mention her attitude toward public space, and she just opened her arms like this. And I found this resonance with the title of Queer Codes, that is not just a way to remind the tool of the QR code, but also to remind these codes, this communication tool we have in our gestures that are often invisible to our attention, and that are definitely queer in the sense that escape the normative frames, but nevertheless as a great communication tool. I wanted to show you the video, but you can see it on my Vimeo, so probably I won't take other time for our conversation. And I deeply thank you for your attention. And from here, we can jump in Australia with, I hope I will say, attendez, oh. I hope I will say well the name, and if I don't, Amer, please, you can absolutely correct me. So we are going to Australia in which is evening. So I deeply, deeply thank you for your engagement, because I know that is, voilà. And we have Amer Kanngieser, I hope I tell it well, informed by over 2 decades of collaborative sonic ethnography work with communities in Europe, Asia, and Oceania, will focus in this talk on the importance of situating oneself in connection to both communities and to land through listening practices. They will show how they approach environments and communities through understandings of relationality and interdependencies, the importance of moving away from narratives of trauma and deficit, knowing when one's presence is harmful and unwanted, and how to take it with grace and live with appreciation. I cut my mic.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for introducing me. Can you see my PowerPoint? You can't see my PowerPoint.
No, I can see your beautiful face, but not your power. No.
Because it says that I am screen sharing.
This is always a mess.
So
I'm sorry.
You
no,
can't see this.
No, but probably if you cut your video, I don't know, and you click on the video itself.
Let me
Hey, Anna, I think you didn't stop sharing your screen.
Ah, that's the point. Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Voilà. Ale. Come faccio io qua? Annulli. Okay, yes.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes,
Thanks a lot.
Okay, good. Thank you. So Thank you, Anna, for inviting me, and thanks to everybody else as well for your talks. I think what I will contribute to this is quite short, and also I think quite different, but also in discussion still as well. I want to introduce where I am and who I am in the way that we do it here. I'm speaking to you tonight from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the East Kulin Nations. As a settler to their homelands, I recognize the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong as the sovereign traditional custodians of this land, and I honor their elders and ancestors. I'd also like to pay my respects to the East Kulin country itself and to its non-human kin. And it's really important for me to begin my talk in this way with this acknowledgement, because it's impossible for me to engage in the work that I do with listening in environments and the relationships between people and environments without being very attuned to the ongoing impacts of colonization and imperialism, including resource extraction, dispossession, climate change, and disaster capitalism. In so-called Australia, where I'm currently speaking to you from, the resistance of Aboriginal people has been ongoing for over 200 years. So as I said, my talk is a little bit different, I think, what's come before, but I think also contributes to the discussion some very important questions. As listeners, particularly those of us from Anglo-European backgrounds, as I imagine many of us here in this conference today are, it's crucial that we situate ourselves as listeners, not abstractly, but in very material ways in the places that we are listening to. I want to thank Anna, Gazia, and Griselda for their insights and for introducing such a wealth of ideas and work here, particularly around sound and gender, feminism, with regards to the situatedness of place and public space. As the final speaker, I thought a lot about what I could usefully bring to this conversation in terms of reflections from my own work as a geographer, as a transgender geographer and ethnographer, as well as a sound artist over the past 2 decades. And in what I'm going to present, I want to focus specifically on the themes of attunement, what it means to inhabit place, asking permission and knowing when to leave from environments and places. These reflections have emerged from collaborations and conversations with scholars and artists over many years, in particular Zoe Todd, Patero Kalule and Carson Cole Arthur, Leon Seeley Huggins, Joey Tao, Katerina Teowa, Maren Alatikau, and Lanyuk, as well as a lot of Pacific colleagues. They have been significantly informed and have been informed by the project Climates of Listening, which I began in 2015, working with predominantly Pacific women, queer and transgender artists, organizers, and scholars to amplify movements for self-determination and liberation in the face of resource extraction, environmental racism, and ecological disaster. So I thought, particularly in terms of time constraints, what I would do was read a piece that I wrote and I'm continuously working on around listening as taking leave. And while it moves the discussion of what we've had from an urban space to, I suppose, a more rural space, I think it embodies questions about how we listen, why and from where, and connects very strongly to the idea of the ear as linked to the gaze that others have already mentioned today, well, tonight, my time. So I'll be reading the piece Listening as Taking Leave. And this is an ethnographic reflection from work that I've been doing in Climates of Listening. In the tailing humidity of early May, some friends took me to Mount Batalamu above Abatha village in the Korayanitu Heritage Park. We drove from Suva in the morning up through Nandi and Lautoka and reached the village by the afternoon. After being picked up by truck to navigate the rocky dirt roads from the town, we were met by villagers at the visitor reception. We had planned to stay in the hut at the top of the peak as dusk was already tinting the sky. The climb to the hut was to take us a few hours along a track reaching over 1,000 meters above sea level. And that in that image there is Mount Batalamu, which is the mountain that I'm talking about in this piece. The path up the mountain was through changing climatic and vegetational zones variegated by altitude. Closest to the village, down low over a stream, were grasslands, the ground steaming and slippery. Pushing through the strands at chest height, we joked nervously about the wild pigs, who we imagined watched us with eyes glittering as the sun sank lower and the birds began to gather their evening song. As we went further up, the grassland merged into rainforest and we were hit by the noise of insects and bats. Dense green leaves and ferns hung over the narrow walkway, and we were soon crossed with the sticky filaments of spiderwebs. In the rainforest, the dark came quickly and unrelentingly, and we clambered over mossy rocks and damp soil, clutching at trees and plant stems, illuminated inadequately by our headlamps. Pitching steeply through the heavy air toward the peak, I lost all sense of time and place, which made me acutely sensitive to everything around me. At some point, we reached a cliff where the air was thin and the wind hit us in the sudden openness following the clouds. We stood on the edge and we saw the lights of a bathroom in the distance. The night cut off the world around our bodies. The disorientation of the climb, its untethering, added a cast to the landscape, a proximity to here and a distance from where we had come. When we finally reached the hut, we were deep within thick cloud. There was no sense of relation to the ground below, just swirling fog. At the peak, it was silent, and the transition from the rhythms of insects and bats to that stillness was unsettling. I decided to record sounds the next morning in the rainforest near that cliff before the sun rose. In the grey dawn, I walked back down the path. As soon as I entered the forest, I felt it notice my presence. The insects fell quiet as I approached them. I sat on the ground and I spoke to the wind. I introduced myself and explained what my intentions were. I spoke about what my recordings were for and said that I would only record if it felt right. After I finished speaking, I waited. As I waited over the next hour, not moving, not touching anything, my body was slowly enveloped in a feeling of wrongness. It's hard to describe what it felt like because a sense of wrongness is relative. It could not be attributed to the cold or the dark because I felt no sense of threat or danger. It was more a feeling of something off kilter, an imbalance. A growing kind of atmospheric pressure began to build on my skin as it rose in my stomach towards my chest and throat. I knew this feeling. I had been practicing for many years to be receptive to a no when I asked permission of place. This is what it felt like. A pushing away, or at least a feeling that made me want to go away. An ambient sense of being unwanted. Between the muting of the insects and the unease of my body, I knew that I would not stay. In 2018, Kiribati scholar and poet Tevririki Tirero said to me when I asked him about the importance of listening, 2 ears, 1 mouth, don't talk too much. Learn to listen more. Not only to hear, but to be able to develop another thing, and that is to be able to interpret. These things are different. They occur at different levels. The hearing and the interpretation of the sound, it's very much part of our world. What Tevriririki's words cautioned me was to be aware of what I am hearing and to find ways to understand what the sounds and the silences of places are telling me. To talk about being unwanted is most often done with regard to people in interpersonal relations. It is far easier to tell when my presence is harmful or undesirable when it can be directly spoken to or gestured towards. Even when it is not said, it is possible to pick up on dispositions, silences, intonations, averted limbs, eyes turned away. There are millions of subtle signals our bodies are trained to respond to know when we are displeasing others. Being unwanted by environments requires a finer attunement because it is harder to hear. To even consider an imposition on environments requires a shift in how environments are perceived. It is not possible to think of them as inert and immutable, or estranged or fungible, which are all common attributions given through Anglo-European onto-epistemologies. This is not how Pacific scholars articulate environments, which are understood as always entangled and co-constitutive. As Unaisi Nabobo-Baba explains, in indigenous Fijian, Italkei languages, the word vanua denotes land as well as place, everything on it and in it. All flora and fauna, as well as waterways, oceans, mountains, and forests, is of physical, social, and spiritual significance to people. If Anglo-Europeans can undo our conception of nature, of environment, of space and place, and conceive of our relations to and with places as dynamic and interdependent, then attuning to a no becomes much more imaginable. And I say this not only in, I guess, what we would call natural environments, but also in urban environments. That environments hold histories within them is incontestable. The world is filled with stories of places haunted by spirits and memories, by the energetic and atomic residues of traumatic events. There are many places that are not to be entered or even spoken of by certain people. Sacred sites for ceremony or important transitions are not to be encroached on, and it is not possible to always know what places hold significance. The acknowledgement of such places through conservation and heritage designations map awkwardly over spiritual perimeters. I can feel, even when human permission is given, that there are places that are not appropriate for me to be in. The moment in the rainforest showed me that even where there are clear protocols of asking and granting permission that are undertaken with villages, this does not mean that such negotiations can be translated onto the specific place itself. Permission needs to be sought again and again, each and every time, from everyone and everywhere. What I carry with me in listening is that I cannot assume consent based on prior interaction. Listening as taking leave is about acknowledging that my presence is doing something to where I am. I have learned to attend to what I sense, even when I might not understand why. Kiribati, an African-American scholar, Teresia Teawa, writes that Indigenous knowledge is not always transparent or accessible to all, nor is it meant to be. Knowledge of environments, knowledge of places are not always mine to ask for or to hear. And to meet the world with this as a reminder is very important. To be able to listen to and appreciate what is not for us as Anglo-European scholars and artists is one of the most imperative things that I have been taught to accept and practice. It is critical to note that in the Anglo-European interest in Indigenous knowledge and eco-relational practices that take focus away from the human, the ongoing resonances of colonial dispossession and harm are not also jettisoned. Geographer Angela Last writes that these moves to decenter the human have sought to reconnect people with the earth while ignoring their situatedness at sites of colonial trauma. As I sat there that morning, I didn't know what the land I was on held, and I will likely never know. That didn't change what I felt. European colonization is driven by the need to know and to take. Underpinning what Gurnpool scholar Aileen Morton Robinson calls the logics of the white possessive is a desire to invest in reproducing and reaffirming the nation state's ownership, control, and domination. The academic and artistic white possessive is demonstrated in the sense of entitlement to environments, spaces, places, and peoples that whiteness is founded within. In this comes the demand for transparency. Becoming attuned to environments, to the ways in which our bodies affect and are affected by environments, is part of careful engagement that can challenge and undo these demands. To listen and to take leave with care, I must express my appreciation as I go. By coming to a place uninvited, I anticipate that my presence can be a violation. To realize that I am unwanted troubles my self-conception of my being as innocent and benign. It is tempting to fall into resistance and antagonism through this discomfort, to find ways to reinterpret world or to refuse to pay attention. But to be able to hold the kindness of a directive to elsewhere with respect is something that I cultivate. To thank the place for its generosity despite my imposition, to thank environments for some transfer of energy is the very least that I can offer. To respect that somewhere is not mine to know or experience is fundamental to living in relation. As I packed my microphones away, I thanked the trees and cicadas and dirt and air. The atmosphere around me felt tense, like a breath held, a suspension. I emerged from the bracken, back onto the mountain peak, and the feeling in my body sunk back down through my throat, my chest, and stomach into my feet. When I turned to look back, the sun was glancing off the leaves, dappling the path with light, and I felt a profound sense of relief. The insects had begun to whir louder again the further I got, and I knew without a doubt that the world held within those sounds was not meant for me to hear. And in the interest of time, I will leave it there. So thank you, Anna.
Thanks a lot, Amer. It was amazing to listen to you. I think we have, I have a lot of questions, but probably we don't have that much time. We have like kind of 10 minutes. So I warmly invite the audience to intervene if you have any question concerning one of the specific presentations you have just listened to, or reflections that you want to share with us. It's your moment. And probably we can put the video if you don't mind, because it's very alienating to speak with my face on the desk. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah. So is there anyone who has a question or not? Or I don't know if among you, I mean Gazia, Amer, and Griselda, there is something that you want to share now that we have made the round of our presentations. Otherwise I can launch something that I think, because of course there are a lot of, in the decision to this conversation among us, in a way, there were a lot of similar critical approaches that I was interesting to put in dialogue. And I think that something that erased today is also the value of silence in this analysis of urban analysis, in this tension, for example, that Amer was stating out about asking permissions, and something that requires, if I understand Amer, a kind of empathy with people, a kind of intuition probably that's also behind the cultural norms. You mentioned the silence as a way to understand our position, no? In the case of Griselda, she was speaking about the possibility to listening to the walls and erase, clean these walls as a way to mute these walls, no? So there is this shifting about the silences and something that can communicate, and silence that can be something that is a form of censorship. So I don't know if you want to add something about this in particular. No. Okay. Gasia, you want to say something?
Perhaps just a kind of small thing, which is, you know, something that I really appreciated about the talks and everybody's talks, and particularly in Amer's talk. And I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name correctly. Sorry. Amer, could you please correct me if I'm...
Mike. Sorry, I was muted. It's Amer, but yeah, it's close.
Cheers. Yeah, I think silence, I mean, for me, it's there's many layers of what you're describing as silence, Anna. If I think about, for example, the example that I draw on Ali Martin's project, the Don't Mute DC movement, this is a movement which was specifically about specific forms of silencing in Washington, DC. Let's say the city and gentrifiers, it was specifically a noise complaint that came from a new development, you know, across from this building where they had been playing go-go music on loudspeakers for about a decade. And, you know, so when is silence kind of upheld? How is that legislated? Who is being silenced and kind of shared, and especially in you know, shared urban spaces, diverse with diverse populations, and when those populations come into conflict, in this case racialized as well as classed forms of conflict. So I think that's an important thing to consider. But I was hearing Amer's you know, proposition as something, you know, consider inviting us to think very, I think, critically, and it's certainly something I will think about a lot and, act on as well, going into the future, that there is this kind of underlying premise within a lot of sound practice, sound studies work, that listening is available to everybody, but also that we can listen to and record and catalog and analyze any sounds and sound environments that we want, and that's almost a given, and it's something that must be performed all the time, this kind of knowledge production. And so something that I was would very much take away from that talk is that we must be very conscious about the ethics of listening and the politics of listening and what it means to listen and where listening is unwelcome, and to be sensitive to that and to not listen if that's something which shouldn't be happening. So I guess I'm seeing these as quite different things in a sense. Let's say different forms of silencing, but also the researchers or the idea of not to listen as a ethical stance.
Yeah, I think the work of Aileen Morton Robinson, who's an Aboriginal scholar here, is really, really instructive on this kind of thing. And I think it's also something, especially, with people working on gender and, this idea of like feminist listening or like, any kind of like, I guess, like political listening and things like that, is to really kind of think about also the histories of listening and European colonization, what it actually means to listen to a space, because, we talk a lot about the gaze and we talk a lot about the objectification through the gaze. And Kazia, exactly as you also mentioned so brilliantly in your talk, like those kinds of parallels with field recording and things like that as well. And I think to begin from the question of like, who am I to listen? Who am I listening? What am I doing in listening? Like, I kind of feel like that's the first question we always have to come from, rather than to kind of see listening itself as this universal benign act, is like, what does it also mean as a white person in a space to kind of impose my listening on it? And that kind of relationship as well between like sound and knowledge production. I think that quote from Teviriki really hits at home for me all the time, is the differences as well between listening and interpretation, and how seamlessly we often kind of do that. And so I think, yeah, there's a lot of questions there around like listening and silence and silencing, but how even listening silences, like how presence silent, like just sheer presence silences, because listening is always embodied, so we're always there. So yeah, I think it's important to bring those kinds of questions up when especially if we're trying to talk about decolonization, which I don't think actually I'm not competent to do whatsoever personally. But I think that especially if there's trying to open up space for thinking through those sorts of things within listening practices, I feel like that's an important place to start.
Yeah. This is kind of parenthesis, a very very quick reaction. But I was thinking, for example, yes, what you are saying, Amer, about the how we legitimate ourselves to listen in specific context, and how we frame this listening. This is also another big question, because, for example, for a period of my life, I worked a lot, especially in Morocco, and a little bit in Dakar and in other geographies as a white artist, woman artist. And for example, a personal reflection that I had during this period of my life is that artists around me worked a lot with orality, with the voices, with listening, but they don't frame it as a sound art practices, for example. And coming back to the critique that Gazia was making at the very beginning, that I know you are also sensitive to, Amer, about the field recorder ear, which reminds us somehow the white male gaze. I know this is something that I want to put on the table, because again, in sound art is clearly a Western invention. I mean, we are almost almost all white, and it's clearly cultural framed, no? And also in this discipline, even if it's very different and plural and over and over, I think there is the perversity of citationality. Probably I don't tell it well. Sarah Med speak about the quotation that men quote other men in order to keep things as they are in the production of knowledge, but we are speaking also in sound art. So it's something also that we can probably put on our table. And it's not, of course, to speak about women and men, but about masculinism and the possibilities of feminism.
May I add something quite brief to that, Anna? I think that's really important to recognize exactly what you said, the neurological and kind of, let's say, I don't think it's the case that most sound artists are necessarily white, but it's simply how some of those canons have been formed and those histories have been told, and who is represented in the kind of major festivals, competitions, et cetera, in faculties and so on. But I think, as those disciplines or interdisciplines are also entering a kind of more mature phase, there is a growing kind of critical consciousness around their underlying epistemologies as well, and that there is, something, what is operating within sonic arts practice, and that must also be something that's really critically examined, just as, let's say, sound art, sound studies at one stage was perhaps the more transgressive kind of practice, but there's actually it's also reproducing a lot of those same, tropes that we found in musical practices and composition and culture as framed within kind of Western art and music history. So anyhow, just to say that, yeah, I do think that this is something, moving forward that we can't kind of continue to do unconsciously. And there are some really serious challenges being posited towards that field.
I also think, just to add to that as well, in terms of citational practices, someone who I collaborate with quite a lot, Zoe Todd, talks a lot about, as a lot of other Indigenous scholars do as well, the importance of acknowledging place and the importance of acknowledging environments as collaborators. And I think that it's really important to do that as well. There's a really brilliant collective here called the Baraka Collective, and it's some geographers that work with a lot of Aboriginal community members. They been working together for a really long time. And one of the co-authors in their geographical scholarship is the country on which they work. And so there's a constant citational practice with country and with land and with place. And I'm not differentiating here rural and urban or anything like that. It's kind of a little bit arbitrary because, at least here in this settler colonizer country where I am, everywhere is country. It's just been built up. And I mean, that's exactly the same for everywhere, well, not everywhere is Europe. I'm talking about here in settler colonizer countries, but I think it's really important as well to also reconfigure what gets acknowledged and who gets acknowledged within citational practices as well, because I think that's the thing. If we are what Gazi is saying, if we are trying to move away from the ways that sound studies and all of the disciplines that we're in have been established, and I mean, geography is terrible, geographers literally are the colonizers, on their little boats, making maps, I think that if anything is going to be unsettled in any way, it also has to begin with an acknowledgement, a very serious acknowledgement of how we relate to place, and how place relates to us as well. So yeah.
I don't know if Griselda want to add something about, I don't know if you have something to add.
No. I'm silent. I'm keeping silent.
Or if we have some specific also questions about Griselda presentation, in particular, for example, yeah, because we are speaking about listening as a way to interpret, our surroundings, but we could also speak about production of listening. And I think that in the presentation of Griselda, there was an interesting focus on those, also on the appropriation of the space of voicing and silence with Las Madres de Preciado de Mayo. Yeah, and of course, I mean, it was implicit that we have all voices, but we have not all the same listening. And so sometimes we have to shout down, as in the case that you mentioned, and as for the movement of Me Too movement, with the demonstrations that you were showing us, and on the opposite side, to decide to keep silent as an arm, also to refuse the language, and I think it was very also inspiring.
Yeah, and in order to talk about colonization, well, I'm from Argentina and I'm speaking with you, and you are from Europe, so you are always, you as intellectual or academic, we find always that colonization is a main topic, and it's interesting from here to hear these thoughts. But from here, because colonization is also, for example, the dictatorship in Latin America, the last dictatorships are a good example. So, but I think when I'm trying to say is like from here, from not from Argentina, because I'm not talking for Argentina, but from here, from where I stand, I think it's a lot of work to do about how we listen the silence, because here, for example, in this pandemic situation, I'm professor and I'm teach in a country who implies that a lot of people was silent because the pandemic, because they don't have the access to this to the connection to the internet, in our public school. So how I listen this silence, because I'm talking in a class and some voices are silent because the context. So for me, think about silence is a very difficult way to approach to the privilege of who has, for example, connection to internet. I know in Europe this is maybe, in the academic world of Europe, is maybe not happening with the students, but in Latin America is a very reality. And I think listen the silence is a song, no? Listen, no, I don't know. But listen the silence is I don't know, is for a lot of work to do in this subject. I don't know. My English is not good because I am from Argentina.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know if you want to add something else, or if there is someone, I said for the last time, if there is someone in the public, in the Zoom audience, who want to sing us a song or make a noise, no, or ask a question, is the moment. Otherwise, I think we could, no? I think no. If you have
Elena, there is a comment.
Elena, yes. Thank you, Griselda. I'm a disaster with Zoom. Elena Biserna, so we could add about languages, power dynamics, and the need to use the oppressor language to be heard in academic context. Yeah. Ellen, I don't know if you want to, we can listen to you, or you were just putting this. Yeah. Just like this. Okay. Yes. Yeah. It's a little bit this idea.
I want to add that I'm work with in this context with a lot of Congress or whatever academic situations in around the world, and it's in English, for example, in Argentina, is not a common language. You know, it's the upper class is fluid in this language, but in public schools, in them they don't teach English, for example. So the average people not talk fluently English. So all this, because we normalize that this conversation, because I'm from Argentina, you are from, I don't know, Italy, and the other is from la la la. Well, we have to talk in English, but we normalize this. But well, it's a thing that I think we can change, because we need to, in order to think who is listening and who is allowed to listen this, and well, maybe if we design these academic situations, maybe we have to bring a translator or I don't know, because I think this is a topic that I'm interested in explore, because for me it's very difficult to talk in English, but a lot of colleagues are keep outside this because they don't understand English. So talking about colonialism.
Yeah, and access in general. Yeah, we do our best, but we have still a lot of things to get better. I completely aware of it. Yeah, and it makes also think about what Elena was saying, no? That in order to debate on topics that are important for us, we have to adhere to some power dynamics in the language that comes from academic languages to English, for example. Of course, yeah. I share your pain when I speak English anyway. So, but yeah, no, I get your point. Yeah, I don't know if there are not other reflections, reactions, or questions. That I think it's the case. I deeply thank you, all you three, Gazia, Amer, and Griselda, and I'm really sorry. I promise I will do a project on this big issue that I have with names, foreign languages. Again, speaking about colonialization and language, I'm aware about my problem. Thanks a lot for your time, for your engagement, for your participation. That is very generous from your part. And I do hope that this is the beginning of further reflections, common reflections together, because you are really inspiring to me. Thanks also again to Amer for hosting this session, and to Nadine for promoting it. And thanks to all the audience that stayed with us until now. I hope you spend a wonderful rest of the day. I think that Amer will go to sleep probably, and Griselda just started her day, so she will take probably another coffee, and Gasha and me, we are going to eat. Thanks a lot, really. Thanks a lot, really. I really appreciate it. Have a nice day. And this will be recorded, so I will, of course, share with you all the link. Ciao. Thank you.